Continuing on with the supergroup SARS, which are photosynthetic, generally speaking, or phagocytes. The last kingdom is Rhizaria. These are thread-like amoebas. That means that their extensions, called pseudopodia, are long and thin. And there are three phylums. The first one is Cercozoans. Cercozoans are predatory. They're kind of nondescript in terms of features. They are thought to take on green algae as secondary symbionts. In other words, they basically did endocytosis of that. In fact, Euglena is thought to perhaps have been a cercozoan that swallowed one. And there's a diagram in your book that talks about secondary endosymbionts. The second phylum is foraminiferans, or forams. These are part of lime rock. They're made of calcium carbonate. Most of them are aquatic, and some are really large, like as large as dinner plates. They are multi-chambered and multi-nucleated, which probably accounts for how they can be super large. And they have their shells called tests, which I said before are made of calcium carbonate, are the part that is hard, and then because they're porous, these pseudopodia stick out of the pores. The pseudopodia allow for movement and feeding, and they're symbiotic algae. They have a symbiotic relationship with algae for some of them. All right, so the last phylum in Rhizaria is radiolarians. These are marine. A lot can be found in seafloor sediments. Their tests are made of silica oxide, so they're kind of glassy looking, and they tend to fuse together to other tests. The pseudopodia radiate out from the center, so they have kind of a really star-shaped look. They're very unusual looking, so check them out on the PowerPoint that I will also provide. The last supergroup, or not the last, the second to last supergroup we're going to talk is archaeoplastids. These are red, green algae and plants. So all of them are photosynthetic and all of them are multicellular. They are, there's four kingdoms. There's kingdom Rhodophyta, which are the red algae, Chlorophyta, which are a green algae, as well as Charophycans, were also a green algae, and then Plantae. All right, so I'm sorry, my dog always chooses this time to squeak. All right, so Rhodophyta are red algae. Most are multicellular and large, and they have chlorophyll and carotenoids. These carotenoids have a special name called phycoerythins, which absorb blue and green light, which is going to be making it through to deeper water. So in shallow water, they have less of these carotenoids, and so they look green. And then mid-level, where the shorter wavelengths of light are the ones that are making it through, the plant looks red because they're absorbing green and blue light. And then at darker levels, they look black because they're not absorbing as much light at all. Examples of this are nori, or just the typical seaweed that you see at the beach, with the thallus is really lacy, and you might have noticed that if you go over to the East Coast especially. All right, the next Chlorophyta, the kingdom Chlorophyta, has a lot of species. Most of these are freshwater. Chlamydomonas, which you might have seen in another class. They're very active and they swim all around, and they're green, so they're kind of interesting looking. Or Volvox. And these are the ones that have the symbiotic relationship with lichens, lichens being a type of fungi, and algae symbiosis. The Charophycans are closer to plants. We'll talk a little bit more about those guys later, what the differences between plants and those are, but they are generally speaking somewhat different than plants, and then we'll do plants later too. So we're getting to the groups where we're basically gonna not talk too much about them. The last super group is called Uniconta. These are all heterotrophic. Some are by absorption, heterotrophic by absorption, and some by ingestion. The ones by absorption are fungi-like, and the ones by ingestion are animal-like. So the kingdom Amoebozoan, they have lobe-like pseudopodia. These are somewhat fungi-like. So Myxogastrida is a plasmodial it's plasmodial, which means it has multinucleated strands. So just like looking at these are also called slime molds. So they're going to have a 2N structure, which grows, and you can see there's many nucleuses in this mass of gook. Basically, there's like strands, and they're multinucleated. And then eventually they'll put out a sporangia. The sporangia will do meiosis and make spores that are 1N. Those will start growing on the ground, and those will make little 1N amoeboid cells that move about. They could make also flagellated cells. These are basically like sperm. These are like the egg, and they will get together and join and become a 2N structure again. So this is a very fungi-like, and we'll talk a lot more about life cycles as we go through some of the other groups. And so anyway, that's plasmoidal. The next group, which is called Dictostelida, it's similar in the sense that it also has a sexual part of its life cycle over here. But then most of its life cycle is lived within the 1N structure. They will have multinucleated strands that is basically like aggregated amoeboid structures. And again, this is a type of slime mold. And they'll make fruiting bodies, and these fruiting bodies will produce spores that are 1N. And this asexual part can keep going by itself. But the sexual part occurs every now and then. So that's a little bit different than the other group that had both going on at kind of the same time. And tubulinids are unicellular in soil or water. They're kind of they're also fungi-like in their life cycle. And entamoebas are typical amoebas that you think of. So these guys are starting, they have the lobe-like pseudopodia, like all of the things in this group, but these guys are heterotrophic by ingestion. So they are a little bit different than the other three groups. Kingdom fungi, we're going to talk a lot more about later, and nuclear larida, we're going to skip them, but they're kind of fungi-like. The kingdom coanaflagellate are closely related to animals, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later also. And Animalia, again, we will cover more later. So we've made it through kind of the general format of the diversity that we're going to be covering. All these things that I said that we'll do later. We're going to do a whole unit on plants and a whole unit on fungi. Well, actually, fungi will include with the animal groups. All right, so we'll talk a lot more about these guys later.